Just a second here. There we go. All right, let's get started. Jesus, we thank you and praise you and bless you. We lift up your holy name. You're worthy of all praise and glory and honor. Your name is above all names, Lord. Thank you for what you're doing, what you want to do, Lord. I ask you to help us to hear just the short story that you have for us today, Lord, that we would hear what you have for us to hear. Thank you for your mercy and your kindness. Amen. First of all, I want to share about an encounter that Yvonne and my mom and I had at a restaurant the other day. It was really cool. We were sitting there, and I heard behind us, a waitress apologize to the people at the table behind us because she said, I had to check and see if that couple out there is my regulars, that they always come in, I want to have their order ready for them. Which, that just doesn't happen that often. And she didn't quite have their order ready, but she just wanted to make sure that she had everything prepared as well as she could for them. And a few minutes later, I saw an older, I'm guessing in their 90s couple, late 80s, early 90s, come in. And she came walking with them. She was holding the lady's hand and walked her to the table and seated her. And she asked the husband, she said, do you want your regular? And he said, and one to go. And they always split a order of chicken fingers and a loaded baked potato. And then they wanted some chicken fingers to go. But she was so sweet and tender and gentle in how she dealt with them that it really, she caught my attention when I heard her say something, and then when I saw her come in with them, it really just spoke to me. And so the next time she came by, I got her attention. I said, I wanted to tell you how precious that was, how wonderful it was to see you treat them like that, and to encourage you that was, it was. And then she started telling us about her story a little bit. And her story was that she said that she just does it because it's her job to serve people. But she said, last year in November, I was homeless. She said, cancer. My husband has stage 3 cancer, and we were homeless because of cancer, which is terrible. But she wasn't upset, she wasn't bitter, she wasn't negative. She said, at one point in time, she said, we were down by the creek, by a fire, and my husband gave his heart to Jesus. She said, now he tells everybody about Jesus. So, even though he's only 97 pounds right now, he went to church with me last Sunday. So she was just encouraged. She said, and then, she said, I had $3,000 and I knew I had to give it away. She said, we were homeless. And my kids said, Mama, we're homeless. And I said, shut up. She said, shut up. You don't know what Jesus has for us. It was so sweet the way she said that. Because I mean, just what she said. I said, shut up. We don't know what Jesus has for us. This is a test. So she gave away that money, and then, don't know the details, but God worked it out for them to be able to buy a house. And not only that, it was like a 4-bedroom house on a little bit of property, an acre or so, over in Spartanburg. And it was $18,000. So it had to be God. She said, now I need some work. She said, we've had to do some work, but that's all right. She said, we're not homeless. And it's going to be paid for in 2 years. I was like, that's awesome. So she, but we were, and I said, well, what's your name so we can pray for you? Because I want to pray for you and your husband. She said, well, my name's Peaches and my husband's name's Nate. So I'm like, Peaches and cream. I mean, Peaches and Nate. So we, as we were leaving, I told her, I said, we're going to be praying for you. So I want people to pray for Peaches and for Nate, for God's help, for healing, for deliverance, for that God will continue to work through her the way He does. Just because she is so sensitive and so tender and she's very awe-inspiring. She really is. And God helped us to pray for him after we left the restaurant. We had just a good little time of prayer. God really helped. So I'm thankful for that. But I wanted to share that so that people would, if you need to pray for somebody and you're not sure who to pray for, Peaches and Nate, because they are deserving people. And yeah, I don't know what God wants to do, but whatever it is, He's already worked through her, and I think that there's things that God wants to accomplish. So anyway, be praying. All right, so we've been going through Luke, and we're at the end of Luke chapter 5, and I'm just going to read this little bit, just a few verses. It says, first of all, Jesus' question about fasting. It says, then they said to him, they being the Sadducees and the Pharisees, why do the disciples of John fast often and make prayers, and likewise those of the Pharisees, but yours eat and drink? Why do your disciples eat and drink, and John's disciples fast, and the disciples of the Pharisees, various disciples of the Pharisees fast, yours eat and drink? And he said to them, can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom's with them? While they're having a party, while they're having the bachelor party, are they going to be fasting and sober and sad? No, they're going to be having a good time. Said, the day will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they'll fast. So then he spoke a parable to them, and this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. It said, no one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. Otherwise, the new makes tear, and also the piece that was taken out of the new does not match the old. No one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. And no one, having drank old wine, immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. So, first of all, if you had a hole in a t-shirt, would you go and buy a brand new t-shirt and cut a patch out of it to patch the hole in the old t-shirt? Doesn't make no sense. Now, let's take that a step further. Say, all right, somebody, because back then they wove material for use. So they wove some brand new material to make patches with. If you had brand new material and you sewed it onto old material and then you washed it, what would happen?
Brand new material would look kind of dirty.
Well, the brand new material would shrink. And so if it was sewn onto the old material, and then it would shrink and kind of make it all pull together, and then as soon as you tried to put it on, the old material would pull out to where it should be because it fits, and the new material would shrink because you sewed it on before it was shrank, would rip. It would rip the old material. So then you'd have a bigger hole than you had in the first place. It's one of those parables that Jesus said that just kind of make you go, If you're going to patch something, you use material that matches. That's what he said. He said, besides that, the new material wouldn't match the old material. So if you're going to patch something, you use something that matches. You patch it with something that's been around a while. That looks the same, that feels the same. It's not going to, shrink and tear it. So then, he said nobody puts new wine into old wineskins or into old wineskins. At that point in time, the way they made wine wasn't like we do today. Today we make it in big vats and it sits in containers and all that. In that day and age, they would take the grapes and the juice and they would they'd crush them and they would mix in they might add a little bit of extra sugar and then it was using natural yeast and they would pour that into a wineskin. Now a wineskin was made usually out of a lamb skin. So when they butchered the lamb, they would take the skin and then clean it all. So it was rawhide, basically. Then they would sew it all up, back closed, turn it inside out so the stitches were on the inside and it would help seal it. And it was very flexible. They'd fill it up, sew the neck of it closed, and then store it while the fermentation process happened. Now when fermentation happens, what happens? Carbon dioxide forms, different gases, but the yeast forms, releases carbon dioxide, so it expands and then it'll contract, and so there's a lot of swelling and contraction, and then shrinking, and the rawhide could handle that. The fresh wineskins could handle that because they were supple, they were very soft. Once you emptied out a wineskin, it would dry out. Has anybody ever seen a rawhide dog chew toy? Are they flexible? Only after the dog's been chewing on it for a while. And they're all slobbery, then they're flexible. But they dry out, they're not flexible at all. So if you put that new wine into an old wineskin that's all dry, it's not going to be supple, it's not going to be stretchy. It's simply going to rupture as soon as the processes started fermentation, and then it would break, and all the new wine would pour out.
Disintegrate.
Now, what Jesus was saying there, he was saying you can't have something new, the kingdom of heaven that he had brought, that he came, this new covenant, in an old rigid structure. There has to be something new. Now he wasn't saying that you get rid of the old. I mean, as he said nobody who's drank from old wine immediately wants new wine, because they're going to say the old wine was better because it's aged a little bit, it has more character, more flavor, it's been around. And he was talking about the law, he was talking about Judaism, he was talking about the interactions that the Jews had had with God for thousands of years at that point. That is not something that you just get rid of. It's to be appreciated because it's more mature, it's more flavorful, but the new wine can become flavorful, can get character, can grow, but you have to put it into the appropriate vessels. Another point he talks about, we all become new. Old things become new. And that's what happens when we accept him, we accept the sacrifice that he made, then we become like a new wineskin, and we can be filled with new wine. And then the processes that happen won't destroy us.
So, could you put old wine in a new wineskin?
You could put old wine in a new wineskin, yes. It wouldn't stretch it out, and I don't know that it wouldn't leak, but I'm not sure that it would fill it, that would cause it to go through the processes the same way. But you could put old wine in a new wineskin, yes.
Would it change the...
It would change the flavor of the wine, though, because of the processes of that rawhide and not having.
Doesn't the rawhide that's part of the reason there's like carbon dioxide released and stuff?
I don't know.
I
I wonder. I have a feeling it probably affects the way it seals up and shellacks it and all that. So if you put old wine into it, it might leak.
So,
It may not seal it.
The rawhide has to have some sort of, it's got to, that the wine is pretty much treating
Right.
the inside of the wineskin, and so it's a chemical
pickling
process.
It's basically pickling it.
Yeah, and when you pickle something, that releases carbon dioxide and
other things. So, but I don't know if putting old wine into a new wineskin would be affected. It wouldn't rupture it like putting new wine in an old wineskin would. But I don't know that it would be able to hold its integrity, if that makes sense. It's a good question. So it's something to think about. But I really don't know. But if we, what was I gonna say?
sorry.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to consider that we don't want to, that Jesus wasn't saying to get rid of the old wineskins and the old wine. Traditionally, that was the wine, the old wine that has been around for a while would be, when before this, when Jesus was at the wedding feast, and they were talking about, people usually keep, they serve the lesser wine first, and then they serve the good wine at the end. They serve the good wine at the beginning and the lesser wine at the end. Normally, they serve the old wine first because it has more character, more flavor, and then when people have drank enough, they'll serve the new stuff that's not quite as good. And so, new wine just hasn't developed. It's not that it's not as good, it just hasn't developed. It hasn't grown, it hasn't turned into something with structure, with nuances, with, all those things that wine has. And so, Jesus wasn't saying to get rid of the old wineskins with the old wine. And if we're not careful, we'll do that. We'll say, oh, look, we got all these old wineskins on the shelves. We don't need those anymore. Throw them out. Now we got new wineskins. No, you partake of, you use the old wine.
So what does the old wine represent? Oh.
Well, I mean, the old covenant, the to learn from the prophets, to learn from the law, to learn from for Christians, it's to learn from the Jewish tradition. Because there's so much to learn about the character and nature of God, about how He wants to treat His children.
But does that mean so you learn from those, but you take it with a pinch of salt, some of the things, or?
It's not that you take it with a pinch of salt. It's that we have to remember that Jesus said that we're no longer, or Paul said, we're no longer under the law. So the law that affected the Jew doesn't necessarily affect the Gentile. It doesn't affect the Christian. But we can still respect it.
So we respect it and learn from it.
We don't necessarily have to, like the dietary laws. If you look, the dietary laws made a lot of sense, particularly when they were wandering through the wilderness for 40 years. Because when you didn't have refrigeration and you didn't have a good way to really cure meat to keep it, there are certain meats that you just don't want to eat. Pork is one of them. Unless you have a way to cure meat for a long time, you can't make ham or bacon out of pork. And so fresh pork goes bad really fast.
You just have to eat it that day.
And so but it was better for them just to not eat it because it was one of those unclean things. And the reason it's unclean is it could kill you. And some of the birds that they ate were clean, but it's because they killed them and ate them that day. So chicken, for example, while it can have salmonella or other food poison type stuff on it, pretty much when you kill it, butcher it, cook it, and eat it all on the same day, it's not really an issue. If that makes sense. So, but what Jesus was saying was we don't get rid of the old. We just have the new as well. You know, the Christians or, you know, Gentiles were not under the law. That old covenant. We were brought in under the new covenant. And people say, yeah, but we're like a wild vine grafted in. That's true, we are. But if I graft a wild grapevine into a domesticated grapevine, while I will have bigger grapes and more grapes because of the strength of the domesticated vine, they're still going to be wild grapes. Being grafted in doesn't change the nature of that vine. It doesn't change what it is. It just gives it a boost.
It's like grafting a pear limb onto an apple tree.
Right.
You're not going to get apples on the pear limb. You're still going to get
You
pears.
still get pears on that pear limb.
And you're not gonna get an apple pear. You're gonna get apple
Not normally.
pears.
Not without some genetic manipulation. But it's still, yeah, it's still, if I take crab apples and graft them onto an apple tree, so we've got apples and apples,
Mm-hmm.
there's still going to be crab apples. They may be bigger, they may be stronger, but they're still going to be crab apples. If I take a sweet apple and I graft it onto a crab apple tree, it'll probably go even better because crab apple trees are way crazy strong as far as the way they just can live through anything. But it's still going to provide sweet apples because of the nature of what it is that's grafted in there. So being grafted in doesn't change its nature. It adds to it, I guess. It changes it, but it enhances it. It doesn't change what it is. It just adds to it, I guess, if that makes sense.
It doesn't turn an apple into
Right.
pear. You know.
Right.
It doesn't.
That's why you can buy a tree that has oranges and lemons and limes and some other citrus fruit all grafted in there. And you still have oranges and lemons and limes and tangerines or whatever. Grapefruit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not, but it's, you know, they're all kind because of the type of trees they are.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're grafted in, we still have the benefit of all of those roots, because if a tree has deep roots, it can get water from way down deep. Whereas, if being new, we may not be able to get water from as deep. So you graft that new branch into that old tree, and it benefits from the water, from the nutrients that those old roots can pull up. And that's how we are. We benefit from the nutrients of the old covenant.
I keep thinking about our ancestry and how we grow up and become who we are, but we still have what we learned as children.
Right.
And that stays with us, that we become our own person,
Right.
so to speak.
Right. Each of our children are different. They're not all the same.
They're not like us.
They're
I mean,
not
they're
like
like
us.
but they're not
Right.
exactly us. And just the same with our parents. We learn a lot from them, and then we move forward.
Right. We're not the same as our parents. sometimes to their chagrin,
Or our grandparents.
or grandparents.
And that kind of goes back to the wineskins thing where it's like you're the same. You come from the same wine, and you come from the same grapes, but and you both started out very similarly, but you age differently, but you still hold very similar morals and
Right. Well, and different, you know, in modern times when they make wine, they can use the same strains of yeast on multiple batches. Back then, they used wild yeast, which was just yeast that got into it from the air. So it wouldn't be the same from time to time because different yeast, whatever they, doesn't bloom, but different yeast would be in the air at different times based on just whatever was going on. So that would change the character of the wine. And that's how, what you were saying, because we have different experiences, it changes our character even though we come from the same base. So there might be a slightly different,
It's a different process.
It's the same, goes through the same process but different, slightly different ingredients make it, the outcome different, if that makes sense. So, something to consider this week. Good conversation. Jesus, I pray you'll help and protect people, Lord. If it gets icy tonight, that they'll be protected. Lord, we thank you for your kindness and mercy. I pray you'll help in the world where people have been hurt from situations, Lord, where people here in South Carolina were injured from the train crash that happened this morning, Lord. I pray that you'll just help in all areas and all ways, that you'll send comfort and strength and help, Lord Jesus. We praise your holy name and bless you.
I need to add one last thing.
Oh, yeah?
And you already kind of mentioned this, but I wanted to cover it. You said you don't throw away the old wine. You don't throw away the old wineskins. Just like you don't just throw away you can't throw away your ancestry, and you can't throw away your morals that you were grew up with.
Your heritage.
Yeah, you can't throw away your heritage.
Oh, that's a good point. Old wineskins weren't useless. They could hold water just fine. And they could be used to hold water because it doesn't expand and contract and stuff, but it still would be, a source of life. So they weren't useless. And that's the other thing. It's not just the old wine that you don't get rid of. You don't get rid of the old wineskins because they are still a benefit. Anyway. All right.